Chinese economic crisis, why three largest Chinese supermarket chains are shutting down. China has historically been the growth engine of the global economy. However, in the recent weeks, investors and world leaders have been concerned about its economic slowdown as they are no longer depending on it to act as a buffer against weakness elsewhere. In actuality, the second economy in the world is the issue for the first time in decades. Plus, the big box stores in China are having difficulties, causing rampant shutdowns. What went wrong for China? Let's see. Chinese supermarkets are in serious trouble. Less than 150 Carrefour China stores remained at the end of the previous year, despite once being the largest international supermarket chain in the nation. With over 260 locations in 2017, shoppers in Beijing, where it is now operating, one of its last locations, posted pictures of rows of empty shelves and freezers on social media last month. The biggest retail chains in China are still having trouble recovering from the pandemic as sales are being negatively impacted by declining demand. Based on their financial filings, 7 of the 14 publicly traded supermarket chains reported lower first quarter sales compared to the same period last year. During the first 3 months of 2022, 4 of them reported a net loss, while 9 of them were in the red for the entire year. In 2022, supermarket owners faced a challenging year due to the world's second-largest economy grappling with severe pandemic limitations and a complicated global landscape. Lianhua Supermarket, which primarily serves customers in Shanghai and the surrounding areas, stated that dwindling demand, supply chain interruptions, and lower market expectations were all major pressures on business. The chain's $30.5 million net loss in 2022 was a result of Shanghai's protracted lockdowns the previous year. With sales down 1.07% in 2022, Yonghui Superstores reported a net loss of 2.8 billion yuan, indicating lower demand. After the nation relaxed its tight pandemic restrictions this year, retail sales in China began to rebound, but the comeback of major supermarket chains is lagging. According to data from the National Bureau of Statistics, China's national retail sales of consumer goods increased 4.8% year-over-year in the first quarter to 11.5 trillion yuan, reversing a 0.2% fall in 2022. NBS data shows that between January and March, retail sales at supermarkets climbed 1.4%, while smaller food stores saw an 8.8% surge and the department stores saw 9.2% rebound. Analysts predicted that grocery sales would take some time to recover to pre-pandemic levels. The Hang Seng Index for Hong Kong fell more than 20% from its recent top in January, and it entered a bear market in the middle of October. Following the Chinese yuan's 16-year low last week, the central bank staged the largest currency defense in history by setting the exchange rate far higher than the projected market value. The problem is that growth is staggering after a sharp uptick in activity earlier this year when the COVID lockdowns were lifted. Exports are struggling, consumer prices are declining, and the real estate crisis is becoming worse. Youth unemployment has gotten so terrible that the government no longer publishes data. Worse, 2 well-known home builders and investment firms have stopped making payments to their investors in recent weeks, which has stoked concerns that the further decline in the housing market may result in increased threats to one's capacity to maintain a stable financial position. A new wave of growth downgrades has been sparked by fears of contagion and a lack of decisive steps to boost domestic demand. Multiple major investment banks have lowered their estimates of China's economic growth to below 5%. We reduce our expectations for China's real GDP growth. UBS analysts said in a research note on Monday that as the property downturn has deepened, external demand has weakened further and policy support has been less than expected. Previously, researchers at Barclays, Morgan Stanley, and Nomura had reduced their projections. This implies that China may fall well short of its stated growth objective of about 5.5%, which would be embarrassing for President Xi Jinping's administration in China. This is a far cry from the global financial crisis of 2008, when China was the first major economy to emerge from the crisis and implement the world's largest stimulus plan. Additionally, it's a turnabout from the early stages of the pandemic, when China was the only significant industrialized nation to escape a recession. So what's gone wrong? After the year's early momentum waned in April, China's economy has been in a slump ever since. However, worries have grown in this month as a result of defaults by Zhongrong Trust, a reputable trust organization, and Country Garden, which was formerly the nation's largest developers by sales of real estate. Investors were alarmed by reports that Country Garden had neglected to pay interest on $2. This brought to mind Evergrande, whose financial defaults in 2021 marked the beginning of the real estate crisis. Evergrande is still going through a financial restructuring, but the problems at Country Garden have aroused new worries about China's economy. Beijing has implemented a number of encouraging policies in an effort to boost the property market. However, the fact that even the more powerful parties are currently on the verge of default highlights the difficulties Beijing will have in controlling the situation. The $2.9 trillion investment trust sector of the nation appears to have been affected by debt defaults at real estate developers in the meantime. According to business disclosures from earlier this month, Zhongrong Trust, which oversaw $87 billion in assets for wealthy people and corporate clients, has not paid back a number of investment goods to at least 4 companies, totaling approximately $19 million. CNN saw recordings from Chinese social media that showed angry protesters even blocking the trust company's headquarters and demanding payouts for high-yield items. More losses in the real estate market could lead to broader financial instability, stated Capital Economics head of China Economics, Julian Evans Pichard. More non-bank financial institutions may experience liquidity issues as domestic funds increasingly migrate to the safety of government bonds and bank deposits, he continued. Another significant issue is the rising debt of the local government, which is mostly the result of the property slump's severe impact on sale revenues and the ongoing expenses associated with enforcing lockdowns throughout the epidemic. In addition to posing significant risks to Chinese banks, the acute budgetary strain observed at the local level limits the government's capacity to promote development and enhance public services. To date, Beijing has launched a slow but continuous stream of economic stimulus packages, such as loan rate reductions and the other initiatives to support consumer firms and the real estate sector. However, it hasn't taken any significant actions. Economists and analysts have informed CNN that China can no longer stimulate its economy as it did during the global financial crisis 15 years ago because it is too leveraged. In an effort to lessen the effects of the world financial crisis, Chinese officials at the time unveiled a $586 billion fiscal package. However, the policies of which were centered on infrastructure projects run by the government also brought in an enormous rise in local government debt and an unheard of credit expansion from which the economy is still recovering. Evans Pichard stated, policymakers seem concerned that their traditional policy playbook would lead to a further rise in debt levels that would come back to haunt them in the future, even though there is a cyclical element to the current downturn that justifies greater stimulus. Beijing authorities reiterated on Sunday that containing systemic debt concerns at local governments was one of their key priorities. In a statement released by the Central Bank, the People's Bank of China, and the securities regulator all promised to collaborate in order to address this issue. Furthermore, China is confronted with a number of long-term issues, including a demographic crisis and strained ties with important trading partners like the US and Europe. The average number of children a woman will have in her life, or the overall fertility rate of the nation, fell to a record low of 1.09 last year from 1.30 just 2 years prior, as per a recent report by state-owned Jimyun.com that cited research from a National Health Commission section. This indicates that China, a nation long recognized for its aging population, now has a fertility rate that is even lower than Japan's. China published figures earlier this year indicating that for the first time in 6 decades, the country's population began to decline last year. According to experts from Moody's Investors Service, China's aging demographics present significant challenges to its economic growth potential. In a recent research report, a larger budget deficit and a heavier debt load could result from the reduction in the labor supply and the rise in healthcare and social expenditures. Reduced domestic savings could lead to higher interest rates and decreased investment as the workforce shrinks. Long-term housing demand will decline, they continued. According to Evans Pichard, geopolitical fracture, declining rural to urban migration, and demographics are all structural in nature and mostly beyond the control of policymakers. Overall trend growth has significantly decreased since the pandemic's beginning and appears to be headed for more declines in the medium run, he stated. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it useful, don't forget to hit that like button below. And if you want to stay updated with more great content like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel by clicking the red button and ringing the notification bell so you never miss any future content from us. Your support means the world to us.